What's up, heathens? How ya doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologists' claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today, we're going to be taking a somewhat in-depth look at how Matt Powell lies for Jesus. Here is just one example of his lies from one of his most recent sermons.
And I'm just thinking, man, you think that every living cell came to life out of non-existence and from dead material to begin with. Yeah. You believe you and I and every other life form came to life out of non-existence.
Yeah, so that's, he's talking about atheists there. That's not what atheists believe. That's not even what science says. The entire sermon is just filled with lies about atheists and about evolution. I cannot believe how much he lies for Jesus. But today we're going to be talking about the 15 lies that I found in Matt Powell's sermon, at least the bit of the sermon I was able to stomach. If you want to know what he's lying about, then please stay tuned. All right, heathens. Well, I found out about Matt Powell's sermon and the fact that he's lying throughout the entire thing by following Hemant Mehta's blog, The Friendly Atheist. I have his article linked down below. He did pick out a few of the more notable lies that Matt tells in this, but I felt like I could go through and pick up a whole bunch more. Ooh, and I found 15 in just the first 20 minutes of his video. Plus, we have a special bonus lie that we will be covering too. So technically it's 16 lies, but whatever. As you all know, Matt Powell, at least here on this channel, is wildly known for thinking that pterodactyls were flying around during the Confederacy.
And the thing is, I do believe there was talk about these things. I believe if we study history, the Confederates were able to shoot pterodactyls, back in the Civil War, and they spread these things out. Anybody can look it up online. They spread these things out, and this is a historical fact. So, they spread this thing out, and it's got a huge wing length. There's a pterodactyl they shot. So, of course, these things have been around. Now, they went extinct, obviously, slowly, but surely. And so I don't believe that just because...
Now, I don't think that he was lying in that particular clip, but I do think that the things that he's saying that I'm going to present to you here are lies. Let's just take a look at lie number 1.
So here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to take a look at what atheists believe, and I'm going to prove to you tonight that what they believe is not anything different from any other false religion in the world. They believe the same thing that any other false religion believes. They say, well, if there is a God, he'll let me into heaven because, it's based on my works, and I lead a good life. I've never done anything that's deserving of hellfire, although they've broken pretty much all the 10 commandments, and they couldn't even tell you what one of the commandments are. If there is a God, he'd let me in. Well, does the Bible say that?
Honestly, Matt, I don't give a fuck what the Bible says. But yes, I do know the 10 Commandments. In fact, I know both sets of the 10 Commandments. Of course, you know the 10 Commandments as being those famous 10 that you find in Exodus 20. The first were basically doing a double-handed stroking of God's cock. And then that's followed up by the whole don't kill, commit adultery, or steal. Then, of course, there's not bearing false witness. And then it rounds out the top 10 list with not coveting your neighbor's property to include your neighbor's wife because they considered women property at that time. But did you know that there's a second list of 10 commandments? This will be found in Exodus 34. This is after Moses has a temper tantrum after finding that his brother, along with the other Israelites, started worshiping a calf. A golden calf, by the way. So he gets a little pissy and he smashes the 2 rocks that God painstakingly wrote with his lightning cock. Then Moses had to find 2 new stone tablets so that God could rewrite his top 10 list with his lightning dick. It's pretty much the same list if you expand the first 5 into about 7 or 8 of the top 10 commandments. This starts in Exodus 34:14. The first commandment in this new set of commandments is, of course, thou shalt not worship any other god other than me because I'm a jealous fuck. The next one is that you shouldn't make any idols. The third is that you shall keep the feast of the unleavened bread, because that's important. Then he lays down how he wants to have the firstborn male of any animal that they have. Then God lays out the work week, 6 days of work and then 1 day of rest, because we all need that jerking off day. And then he mandates that we shall observe the Feast of Weeks, because again, partying is the most important thing to God. Number 7, God says, fuck anybody that uses leavened bread for my blood sacrifices. Number 8 is basically clean up after your fucking selves, you goddamn animals. Number 9 says that God gets first pick of all the fruits that grow on your land. God doesn't want any sloppy fucking seconds. And then finally, don't boil a kid or a small goat in its mother's milk, because of course that is also more important than, hey, Catholics, don't rape little kids. So yes, Matt, I know the 10 Commandments. I can list them all off. I know them better than you because I even know the second set of 10 Commandments. Let's check out Matt's next lie.
It's amazing to me how they define themselves. So let's talk about the definition of atheism. So atheists, what they define themselves as is somebody that lacks belief. They say, well, we don't have any beliefs. Well, is that your belief that you don't have a belief? Logic with me. The Bible said, they say, don't you believe in reason? Yeah, the Bible says, come, let us reason together, saith the Lord. Of course I believe in reason. And it's amazing to me. The dictionary definition, they say, well, we don't have any beliefs. The dictionary definition of atheism is the belief that there is no God. We don't have any belief. Well, wait a minute. Every dictionary, here's another dictionary, the belief that God does not exist. The doctrine that there is no God. So when they try to imagine up this fake definition of what they did, and here's the thing, they define themselves by what they don't believe in. What if I said, well, I'm going to define myself as somebody that doesn't like to go fishing? What kind of sense does that make? Yeah. I define myself as a Christian, and what that means is I believe in Jesus. They define themselves as, oh, well, I'm a non-believer in Jesus. What kind of definition is that? Yeah. That's wild.
Well, Matt, if the entire world seemed to revolve around being a Bass Pro enthusiast, then I would definitely describe myself as an A-Bass Proist. But because the world seems to revolve around whether or not you believe in a magical deity that may or may not exist, I am kind of forced to use the label of atheist in order to describe my position on that magical deity. Also, you played a dictionary fallacy here in this one, because you're saying that, oh, well, the dictionary says it means this, therefore that is what you mean. I get that whatever dictionary you picked up had those definitions for atheist, but even if you just Google the definition of atheist, it has the lack of belief definition as the first one. So you're selectively choosing what definitions you're picking out of these dictionaries in order to suggest that we are wrong about the label that we're choosing. I don't know what you want to call me, but here's what I don't believe. I don't believe in a magical deity of any kind of flavor. So whatever label you want to assign to me, that's fine. But you're just being a dick right here by trying to suggest that you know atheists better than atheists know themselves. It's just an asshole thing to do there, Matt, and it's really uncalled for. There are some atheists out there that say that they believe no God exists. Those would be the Gnostic atheists or the hard atheists. And I'm perfectly fine with them having that position, although I do find it to be untenable. But atheism itself, the word and the label, has many different meanings. As soon as you adhere to a very strict definition of the word, instead of focusing on what the label means to you or in a dictionary, how about you focus on what the person actually means when they use the label? As long as you understand what they mean when they use the label, you can have a conversation. Stop being a petulant fucking child. All right, lie number 3. Y'all ready?
You know, and Richard Dawkins says, well, religion is just mental illness. It's it poisons the mind. Well, it's amazing to me. Is that why 99% of school shootings are done by atheists?
Yeah, that's right. Good.
But yet Christians have their minds poisoned, yet Christians have never committed such an act?
Oh, Matt. Citation fucking needed on this one. I would love to see where you got the information that all school shootings are committed by atheists and that no Christian has ever committed a mass shooting or a school shooting. The fact is that you're just pulling these statistics out of your ass with no evidence to support them. You're using it to fearmonger people into your faith and try to convince them with lies. Who's ready for lie number 4?
Why is it then they turn around and say, oh, well, you guys, the religion's so dangerous to the public, yet atheists lead the world in suicide? They make the dumbest decisions possible. I'm sorry, suicide, I don't care where you are, I don't care who you are. Suicide's not a good idea, it's a sin. God said not to do it. Yep. Now, we know Saul did it, and we know Saul's with the Lord. But you know what? If you're a Christian here tonight, and you're struggling with that, or you have problems in your life, look to Jesus. Amen. Don't be overtaken with such a terrible thought. Yeah. And if a prophet in the Bible could commit an act like that, that tells me that anybody could commit that. Don't let yourself get down to that point. And you know what? They lead the world in suicide, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and school shootings. And yet Richard Dawkins wants me and everybody in this room to believe that religion is what poisons the mind. Yet the atheists do the most mind-poisoning, dumb things that you could possibly even do.
First, I would love to see your citation on this particular fucking lie of a statistic, because atheists are not leading the way in substance abuse or suicide. Let's just take suicide, for example. If atheists are indeed more at risk for suicide, it's probably because they don't have a firm support foundation around them due to the fact that they are an atheist. Now, this doesn't mean that atheism itself is the issue. The issue is that the atheist in this situation does not have anybody to support them or tell them that they love them, no matter what particular position they hold. That particular foundation or that support group for anybody that may be going through depression is important regardless if you are an atheist or if you are a Christian. Now, Christians generally have a community around them, somebody to support them and talk to them and help them with their depression. A lot of time atheists are just on their own. And for an atheist that's dealing with depression, that is not good. So, if you're an atheist versus being a Christian and you both have a firm, supportive foundation of friends and family, a support group around you to help you through those kind of difficult times, you're no more likely to commit suicide in either case. But again, Matt, I would really love to see your citation on how we're leading in those particular categories when after you account for the things that atheists lose when their family kicks them out on the curb or their friends don't want to talk to them anymore or anything like that.
And evolution basically teaches that it all started with an explosion. Let's pretend for a second that evolution is true. They say, well, nothing caused an explosion. What if I said nothing caused something over here to explode? You'd say, well, what caused the explosion? Was there some type of igniter? Was there some type of detonator that started this thing? If I turn around and said, nothing caused it, you'd look at me like I was crazy.
Well, Matt, this is a lie because you start out by suggesting that this is going to be a discussion on evolution, and then you start discussing the inflation of the universe or the Big Bang Theory. You know the difference between the two. You have been told the difference between the two. You're convoluting this particular topic as a way to make it sound ridiculous to your crowd. You're lying for Jesus. Bold-faced lie number 6.
And by the way, people think that evolution is science. It didn't win in the science laboratory. It won in the courts because the American court system said, we got to push this thing in the schools so that people, and even J.D. Rockefeller said, I want to create a generation of people that can't think. He's like, I want to create a people that can't think.
I think the only one that's unable to think in this particular sermon is you there, Matt. And no, evolution is not correct because the court system deemed it to be correct. The few court cases that have been fought over this particular issue have either established that it was okay to teach evolution in a public classroom or whether or not it's okay to teach creationism in the classroom. And I gotta tell you, evolution won out and creationism failed. Creationism is not science. That's what the court determined. Evolution is consistently reaffirmed in the laboratory. The only way that it could have made it to the classroom is if it had enough support behind it from real science, unlike the fake faux science that creationism puts out. Also, it's kind of funny that you're standing up there talking about how evolution or the pushing of evolution in science classrooms produces, kids that don't think, or it's somehow wanting kids or people in general not to think, when in fact the Bible tells you directly not to think and to let God, or somebody speaking on God's behalf, do the thinking for you. It's really ironic how you're talking about evolution forcing you not to think. All right, magical lie number 7.
And evolution is the only theory that's protected by law. And let me ask you something. If your theory has to be protected by law, what does that tell you about your theory? It can't undergo any scrutiny. They say, well, why are you speaking against it? Look, my tax dollars go to that stuff. I better have a say in it because I'm paying for it to begin with. Everybody in here has to pay for it. This is becoming the land of the slave here in America. They're not going to take away free speech from Christians. And you know what? If they just threw one of us in jail, if they threw Pastor Thompson in jail or myself in jail, you know what? We just grow that much more. Because every single time Christians were persecuted in the Bible, they just grew that much more.
No, teaching evolution in the public classroom is not slavery. Jesus Christ, why are you so fucking dumb? Yes, your tax dollars go to pay for the public education system. That's what taxes are for. But you see, the big difference here is that evolution's actual science, whereas creationism is not. Also, do you really want to be throwing around that whole slave term, considering that, you're a Christian? I mean, in the Bible, God has the Israelites taking slaves. He mandates it directly. Also, the United States was a land of the slave at one time. And then guess what? A social movement changed everything. Not Christianity, mind you, but just a social movement in general where people were religious. Christianity has always been a pro-slavery ideology. Until recently, of course. Then, once everybody else changed, they were like, might as well change too. Magical lie number 8.
They say, well, there's still a chance. There's still a chance that evolution could be true. I'm going to lean towards the 10 to the 164th power and the crazy, wild chances. Well, Stephen Hawking said, and I quote, he said, we're a mathematical impossibility. Impossible. You know what the definition of impossible is? A miracle. So atheists literally believe in miracles. I was talking to one time. He goes, well, I can't believe the Bible because your God made an animal talk. And I said, well, aren't we all animals according to evolution? So you believe in 7.8 billion talking animals. 7.8 billion of us here on Earth, and the Bible only mentions 2.
Okay, well, that last little bit right there was an equivocation fallacy. Obviously, when a person is talking about a talking animal, we're talking about animals that don't necessarily speak in English or speak at all or communicate in any kind of intelligible sense. That's obviously what was meant there, and then you're convoluting the conversation by equivocating it to, well, you think that we're animals, so 7.4 billion animals already talk. And the Bible only has 2 more animals talking. So that's very disingenuous, and it doesn't really take that smart of a person to understand the difference between the two. So I feel like it's fairly obvious that you're lying to your audience here for your faith. Obviously, atheists don't believe in miracles. I mean, something being highly improbable does not mean impossible. And I couldn't find your quote from Stephen Hawking talking about how life is impossible. I do agree that life is highly unlikely, but that does not mean that it's implausible or impossible. And you're appealing to big numbers in order to convince your crowd that it's ridiculous to think that the chances of life arising from non-life is ridiculous. Magical lie number 9.
So let's move on from the Big Bang. And you mean to tell me that 326 million trillion gallons of water that are just on Earth alone were crammed into... You can only compress water past a certain point, yet they want to believe that all the water in the universe... Just imagine, folks. I don't know if any of you guys saw it, but in my last documentary, I was talking to the atheist, and he goes, it takes an imagination to consider all this stuff. And I said, just imagine. And I expected him to be like, oh, good one. But instead he's like, oh yeah, just imagine. Just use your imagination.
So on this particular clip, I like how you start off by saying that you're going to move on from the Big Bang, but then you go right back into a creationist's view of what the Big Bang is. Water did not exist when the universe inflated. In fact, right after the universe inflated and filled this universe evenly with particles, it was actually too hot and dense for light to even form and travel through the universe. It really took about 400,000 years or so for atoms to even form. So there couldn't have been water molecules. And you have supposedly looked into the atheist arguments, or at least have looked into the Big Bang and tried to understand it. Surely you came across this there, Matt. Lie number 10.
They'll say, well, must take a lot of faith there to think that a virgin could conceive there, buddy. You know what? These people think a rock conceived. And I'm just thinking, man, you think that every living cell came to life out of non-existence and from dead material to begin with. Yeah. You believe you and I and every other life form came to life out of non-existence. I believe Jesus died and resurrected. Jesus said, I have the power to lay down my life and I have the power to take it again into myself. And so Jesus had that power. But to say that you believe that every living life form resurrected from non-living material, that's crazy. Yeah. That's madness. That's a greater resurrection than I believe in. Look, I just believe Jesus resurrected, and I believe he'll resurrect me because whosoever liveth and believeth in him shall never die. Yeah. Right?
Well, I mean, if I wrote it down in a book, would you believe it then? Also, atheists do not believe that a rock can give birth? You're being hyperbolic so that you can convince your crowd that atheists are ridiculous or atheists have these ridiculous beliefs. It would also not be considered a resurrection for abiogenesis to happen, because that's inorganic material becoming organic material. It's not resurrecting. Nothing died in order to produce the inorganic material. So I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, Matt, other than you're just lying consistently to your crowd to convince them that it's ridiculous what atheists believe. Next lie.
Atheists will often say that, life came about from non-living material. And we've already established, those of us who know any science, that the law of biogenesis states that life cannot come from non-life. Yep. So I don't care how they try to repackage it. The law of biogenesis states, the law that they don't believe of science states that life cannot come from non-life. Yep. The law of biogenesis. And I've had them admit, well, I guess I don't believe in the law of biogenesis. Well, then do you believe in science? And I've had some of them admit and say, well, maybe not. Maybe I need to re-look at this. And you know what? If you're in a discussion like that with an atheist and they're like, maybe I need to relook at things, pull out the Bible.
Oh, yes, because pulling out the Bible is definitely going to convince them of your magical Jew that resurrected. So the law of biogenesis is a phrase coined by Louis Pasteur. And all Louis Pasteur did is prove that organisms do not spontaneously generate from dead, rotting flesh. That is all he did. What he proved is how living things give birth to other living things. That is the entire purview of Louis Pasteur's experiment. It was not to prove that inorganic matter 100% cannot produce organic materials. So we're not repackaging it or anything. In fact, you are the one that is repackaging it in order to deceive your audience into believing that abiogenesis is a ridiculous, unscientific idea. Lie number 12.
And that's why R and Ra and all these freaks, Richard Dawkins, and I said they're freaks, folks, they all complicate everything. They sound so smart and so complicated. A great teacher isn't somebody that just makes everything sound so complicated, so therefore he must be true, because he's using big words. I could use big words too, R and Ra. I could talk about phylogeny and Paleozoic, Mesozoic layers and all that stuff and sound intelligent, but in reality, I might not know anything. Yeah.
Did you basically just complain about atheists being too smart for you? I feel like some kind of meme that just says, huh, fucking nerds, is kind of applicable here. Also, you don't know what Aaron Ra knows, which I can guarantee you Aaron Ra knows vastly more than you do. I'm not claiming to know everything about Aaron, but I do know that his use of the correct words when discussing a complicated issue is not some ploy to trick the audience into thinking that he's smart. He actually is fucking smart. And I get that you seem to not be able to understand it because you say that you can throw out these big words, but I sincerely doubt you really understand what those words mean. Also, earlier in your sermon, didn't you use a whole bunch of big ass numbers in order to argue against life coming about naturally? That's basically the same thing that you're complaining about with Aaron Ra here. Lie number 13.
It's done. But you know what? Because people like me are being censored all the time and being referred to as haters and just terrible hate speech from Matt Powell. How could you not believe in evolution? You know, that's child abuse, they say. You know what? You need to be able to give people the other side, folks.
Amen.
I don't go as far as to say that teaching creationism is like child abuse. I think it really depends on your method of doing it. But I mean, teaching children something that's verifiably wrong is certifiably bad. But also, that's not what you're censored for on YouTube. It's for your anti-LGBTQ and your NIFB trash videos. Those are the reasons why you get censored on YouTube. You portraying it as being censored because you're anti-evolution is just absurd. Lie number 14.
Now, in 1990, a scientist, a paleontologist, went looking for dinosaur bones, right? Because this paleontologist was really determined to find some dinosaur bones, which I congratulate her for doing so. Her name was Dr. Mary Schweitzer. And in 1990, she discovered a dinosaur fossil with blood inside of it, still contained, with the hemoglobin still in the blood. Now, kids, do you think that dinosaur blood could last for 65 million years? I mean, you look outside, an animal that dies, it gets eaten by the birds and the other animals. Blood doesn't last very long, does it? So these dinosaurs had to have been big, right? Because number one, they didn't get eaten by the other creatures. And number two, we know that one was probably buried in the flood.
Oh, goddamn, there was no flood. But also, you're totally misrepresenting Mary Schweitzer. But luckily, Paula Gia got a chance to ask her a question about this particular thing that you're talking about, and so I'll let her tell you how wrong you are.
It depends on how you define it. What is a blood vessel? How do you characterize a blood vessel? How do we know what we have? So if a blood vessel is made up of endothelial cells, if a blood vessel is, we know how to recognize modern blood vessels. Is it different? Yes, it's different. And that's what I mean. Words are really, really important. Do we have blood cells? No, we do not have blood cells. I don't have the data to support that. We have round red structures that localize to the blood vessel channels. They have the morphological characteristics of blood vessels. They have a chemical makeup similar to what you'd expect blood cells to have.
So no, Matt, there wasn't blood that was found. There wasn't anything that you described found. I could just chalk this up to you just simply not understanding it, but you've been doing this shtick for long enough to where you should have heard this by now. So I feel like it's fairly obvious that you're misrepresenting what Mary Schweitzer found in order to convince your audience that evolution is ridiculous. Which, again, evolution is not related to atheism whatsoever. And finally, lie number 15.
And they'll say, well, if you can find a dinosaur and man in the same layer, then we'll believe that dinosaurs and man lived together. Well, we have. We actually have. The Ashley phosphate beds were discovered back in the late 1800s, mid 1800s. And in the late 1860s, scientists discovered dinosaur bones in the same 18-inch layer with human bones. Now, the evolutionists just said, if you find dinosaur bones with human bones in the same layer of strata, that proves that they lived at the same time, and we'll believe the flood. You bring that fact forth to them. Do they believe it? No, because a foolish man stiffeneth his neck.
Again, I don't really care what the Bible says. The Ashley phosphate bed is not what he describes it as. It's very easily explained by wind erosion and water erosion of the layers in the rock. As the environment changes and water comes in and wind comes in and blows off topsoil and all that, the layers are further and further exposed. And so these fossils ended up getting mixed up together. Human fossils in with all these other animal fossils, including some dinosaur fossils. But it was because of natural things that happened, not because a supernatural flood killed everything. But even if you were to take this as actual proof that there were humans and dinosaurs in the exact same area when they died, we should be finding these examples all over the earth, and we simply don't. This would seem to point to some other alternative explanation for why we would find human bones mixed in with all these other animal bones, including dinosaur bones. And once again, it's very easily explained with a natural process. Now, I did mention a bonus clip, and here it is.
He's making money. They say creationism is where all the money is. No, it's not. Every good creation scientist that I've ever known has lost money coming into this. I could be a millionaire teaching evolution. I can learn to speak words a certain way or to say things how they want me to say them to make money. But you know what? The truth is more bright than darkness, and I would have to be accountable to God for that. So I'm not going to go along with the flow. They're like, well, you're just going along with what you've been taught all your life.
You don't make millions of dollars by just accepting evolution or teaching evolution. Aaron Ra has had his channel where he's been discussing the evidence for evolution for a long time. He's not a millionaire. I don't know who you're referencing with this whole millionaire thing, but teachers in general do not make millions of dollars. Now, I'm going to pad out today's video with some interesting quotes that I found from Matt Powell in this particular sermon. I think they're rather interesting, so I hope that you guys will like them.
Excuse me, I'm having a hard time thinking tonight. Look, who cares what they think? Just because the majority believes something doesn't mean it's true. So let's pretend for a minute. Let's go back to fantasy land. Better get back on track here. I feel like I'm making too much sense tonight. Let me slow down.
All right, heathens. Well, that's it for me. I'm glad that you stuck with me through all of these 15 lies from Matt Powell. If you will, please go down below. Let me know what you think about all these lies that he spouts in his sermons. I would really love to know what you think. While you're down there, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of video. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.